I'll edit out the first bit that's recorded. Right. So, right. Hello and welcome to the Solar Shed for the very first of our solar chats or hashtag solar chat. And today, as we announced on social media in the last couple of days, we've got Dr. Charlie Gardner with us. I'm going to leave Charlie to do his introductions, and hopefully we'll have a bit of a conversation that'll be enlightening and hopefully a little bit inspiring about some of the solutions that we can put in place for climate change and the environment. So straight over to Charlie. Charlie, welcome and thank you for being here. Really, really pleased. Obviously, we followed each other on social media for quite a few years, and it's nice to know that you live just around the corner. So that was quite handy picking him up. And just for the purpose of everyone watching, I met Charlie in town today. He actually got a bus in from his village into Kings Lynn. And then we've driven back here in an electric car. So there's no carbon footprint just yet. Charlie, would you like to introduce yourself? Just who are you and what do you do? What do you do?
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it's a real honour to be here for your first show. I'm a conservation scientist and a climate activist. Ever since I was a little kid, I really wanted to do something about the destruction of the natural world. I loved animals, heard about deforestation, wanted to do something. And so that's what I did. I became a conservationist. I spent a lot of time living in Madagascar, helping to conserve nature in tropical countries. And I'd heard about climate change at the same time, but I just did what everyone else does, I think, and just ignored it.
Which is what a lot of people are doing, isn't it? Sadly,
I had my thing I was interested in. My head was full already. Then in 2015, I came back from Madagascar and I got the job at the University of Kent lecturing on conservation science, and I was asked to teach a course on what climate change means for the natural world, the impacts of climate change on nature. So I started reading all about it so I could teach this course. And
I can imagine once you go down that rabbit hole, there's no end to it, is there?
It's really, really terrifying.
It is terrifying.
Properly terrifying. And that had two big impacts on me. So I was reading about the stuff, how, if we reach, a 2 or 3 degree world, there might be no such thing as coral reefs. There might be no such thing as forests anymore, all right? So, and obviously that makes me think, well, what's the point of trying to save endangered species if we're not even going to have forests? We cannot conserve nature if we don't get a handle on climate change. So I switched from just thinking about nature to thinking about climate as well.
Because of the effects it has on nature.
Yeah, it was still because I want to conserve the living world that my focus changed. But the other thing that really struck me really hard was I was going into lecture theatres, speaking to young people, 20-year-old kids, telling them about this awful future that's coming if we don't turn everything around. And then I was walking out of the room and not doing anything to turn it around. And I thought, it was just intolerable to me. How can I know this stuff and not do more?
But isn't that's one of the big things with the psyche of the public, is that I remember as a young police officer, you're walking down the street, or remember the public could be walking down the street, see a really nasty incident and not even blink and just keep walking. It's almost like a human defense mechanism not to act because you'd be shocked into something. And I'm looking at the psychology of it. I'm wondering if that's what's happening at the moment. It's like the don't look up scenario, isn't it? We all know it's happening. We're being told it's happening, but we're then getting our 2-litre diesel cars and we continue. Let's talk about climate change with the bloke we meet on the 747 going to Malaga.
Yeah. You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And that's because we think we're entirely rational people and we act on information, but we don't. We are social animals, right?
Yes.
And we look to other people for cues as to how to think and behave. Think about what happens when the fire alarm goes off, right? You don't jump up and react to the fire alarm. You look to see what other people are doing first.
Yes.
If they're not reacting, it's a drill and you don't have to worry. If they worry, then you worry. And this is exactly the situation we're in our society. So I'm really influenced
I'm
by...
not on my own thinking this then.
No, you're
So
dead
what
right.
we need then is catalysts in communities. We need people who are going to be the champions of the street and things like that.
This is absolutely it. Let me, before we get there, let me tell you about an experiment that really inspires my thinking. So it was called the Smoky Room experiment, and it was carried out by psychologists in America in the 60s. It's quite famous. I'm sure some of the listeners will have heard of it. But what they did, they got participants, university students, and they told them they were coming to attend a meeting.
Yep.
And so they put them in a waiting room outside the meeting, and they start pumping smoke under the doors. When the students were alone, almost all of them, within 2 minutes, they got up to find someone to warn them about the smoke. Obviously, you see the smoke, you get up to warn someone. But they repeated the experiment with actors who were told to sit there, notice the smoke, and then carry on filling out their forms, right? So, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So in this situation, the students, they notice the smoke, they look around them, nobody's doing anything. Oh, maybe these people know something I don't know. Obviously, I don't want to risk getting up and embarrassing myself by making a fuss over something that's really nothing. And so the students would sit there for up to 20 minutes while the room filled with smoke.
This is really interesting because James O'Brien on LBC, I phoned him up last week, or was it early one this week, about exactly that. He was talking about, we can see these things happen, talking about Valencia floods, but we'll still turn a page on a newspaper and then book the cheap flight to Malaga next week.
Yeah, we're in a crazy situation where everybody knows it's an emergency because we've heard, and we're not stupid, and we've got our own eyes. But we walk out into the street, and we look around us, and nobody's doing anything. So we think, well, maybe I must have got it wrong. If this was as serious as everyone's saying, then other people would be doing something. But
I suppose it doesn't help that everyone's glued to a screen, and they get their information from social media and from small screens. So we don't tend to talk to people as much as we used to. Everyone used to talk to each other at the bus stop. Now everyone's looking at their screens at the bus stop. That's
definitely true. And
so we've been disconnected from reality by looking at a different reality, I should imagine, through our screens as well.
You're right. And this lack of connection is a real problem. And it's a real problem because it's... it's one-on-one conversation that's much more persuasive in changing people. It's each other that we trust and care. That's the best way to change people's minds, to get people caring about things, is one-on-one conversations. But there's a problem in that even when we do have one-on-one conversations, we're reluctant to talk about climate change because we think other people don't care. So there's this spiral of silence. We think, because nobody talks about it, we think nobody wants to talk about it, and that means we don't talk about it. Yep. But actually, it's a myth. It's not true. So there was this amazing piece of research in the States a couple of years ago where they asked people, how supportive are you of climate policy? And everyone goes, yeah, I'm really supportive. Then they say, how supportive do you think other people are of climate policy? And everyone goes, no, I don't think they're supportive. So
everyone's saying that they are, but they don't. Right.
So, and the reality is that the majority of people are really concerned, but we think we're a minority because we don't talk about it.
I've got that. That's one of the essence of what the podcast is going to be about as we go forward is about creating a solar nation, the network that we've got are there to serve. And I found out, here I am sitting in the shed for the last 10 years at the bottom of a garden, and I felt in isolation until I started sharing some of my experiences as a business out on LinkedIn, a professional business networking, and other solar companies were saying, do you know what, Kev? I think exactly the same as you. And we found out that the reasons why we got involved in solar are all very, very similar, but we don't share it because they're personal to us. I mean, for me, I was explaining to you earlier, it was when my boys were, I think they were about 7 or 8 years of age, and they stopped sharing a bath with each other. After playing in the river and playing in the garden in the summer holidays, we were putting the oil boiler on to heat the water up again, so they could have a bath. And then I was watching the news of a night time and seeing dead soldiers come back through Wootton Bassett from the oil wars. And that's when I had my realization that was the time to do something. And as it happens, I saved a shed load of money at the same time by having solar. So we do need to talk about it. But I was going to ask you about the book. You're writing a book at the moment because this is going to touch on what people can do. Is it going to be about the psychology of it, or is it going to be about facts and then action?
So partially. So I think so. So yeah, my book is a how-to guide. There's just huge amounts of people are really worried and want to do something, but we don't know what to do. And I think this is a real problem. So well, I think there's two problems actually. One is that we don't know what to do, and the other is that we don't think it'll make a difference. Yeah, I'm just one of 8 billion people.
Turning the radiators down might save you £100 a year, but it's not going to solve the world's problems.
Yeah,
right. I'm with you.
So my book tries to overcome that. Firstly, by giving people advice on what to do, and then by talking about why it's important. So, firstly, in terms of what we can do, I think there are 5 main. The way I see it, there are 5 main things we can all do. First one is taking care of ourselves. Like, this stuff is tough and it's hard to deal with. So we need to, allow ourselves to feel and take care of ourselves.
Well, on that, but the more you go down the research, it is very, very negative because the facts are there and they're being played out before our very eyes in different parts around the world. Just because things aren't happening here on our own doorstep doesn't mean the changes aren't happening elsewhere. And that can be very scary for people is when they start researching what is happening. That can be very scary.
It is.
We need to look at light-hearted but practical solutions to what is going to be quite a catastrophic time for people.
And the mental health aspect is a massive part of it. So
they talk about this climate anxiety within young people, don't they?
It's a huge issue, and lots of people suffer from it. I suffer from it. I suffer from all sorts of mental health impacts, not just anxiety, but grief for when I see nature being destroyed. It makes me sad.
Yeah.
But part of the issue with these mental health impacts is not just that people are really scared and worried, but part of it is that people feel helpless. And that is why it's so important.
What difference am I going to do on my own?
That's why it's so important to do something, because it helps you regain a sense of control. And this, I think, is really important. So I've noticed, when I'm driving my car, right? Even though it's a massive deadly machine and I could cause an accident with a moment's, lack of concentration, I feel quite relaxed.
Yep.
When I'm a passenger and my wife's driving, I'm not quite as relaxed. I'm a bit tense when she turns around corners. I feel the need to point out hazards and stuff. I'm just a little bit more tense.
I'm smiling to myself here. I'm not going to make any comment whatsoever about your wife's driving, Charlie.
But she's better driving than me, but it's because I'm not in control.
That's it.
And that, I think, is the real benefit of shifting from being passive to just doing something about it, is you regain a little sense of control. And, the climate crisis isn't like the threat of nuclear war or terrorism or asteroids or something where you have no influence.
They're sudden impact. Yeah, they're sudden impact events that, you just got to respond to them. Whereas climate change is what we call, ironically, is what we call in emergency planning and critical disaster sort of management, a rising tide event. We know that it's coming. We know what we need to do to impact it, but we're slowly sleepwalking towards it still at the same time.
Yep.
So it's about, okay, so there's the first couple. So what are the 5 elements you're saying about what we can do?
The thing we always hear all the time is focus on our own footprints. And yes, there's all sorts of reasons why we should do that. And, solar is a big part of that. And I'd like to come back and talk about the importance of solar later. But of course it's, it's really limiting. You talked about me getting the bus.
Yep.
I'd love to do that every time, but the bus service isn't good enough. So I still need to own a car. Right?
Here in our village, we have 3 buses leaving the village to go up to King's Lynn a day, and we have 2 coming back. It's a recipe for an exodus, but also the buses coming back, the last one leaves the town at 1:15. Now, if I was a 16-year-old who wasn't going to college and I was getting a job in King's Lynn, who's going to give me a job where I have to leave at 1:15 to get back?
It's a real problem.
Social mobility is a massive issue.
Yeah.
Is a massive issue.
Absolutely. And it's a great example of why we can't rely on people to reduce their own carbon footprints because we are all dependent on the infrastructure
So
around
why
us.
is it then? Why is it then, Charlie? In China, in Shenzhen, for example, of a city, they've got 2,500 electric buses and 17,500 electric taxis. You're not allowed to be a public transport unless you are all electric. Why is it they can do it, but we can't?
Strong government or government will, I think. You're coming to the heart of the matter here, I think, with the transitions we have to go through as a society to deal with the climate crisis. We tend to think of it as a technological problem. There are technical solutions, but the thing is, we have those. We have the answers to most of the technical problems already.
We've got the proven technologies.
It's being implemented at scale. So it's a social and political problem. I don't know about politics in China. What I do know is that the transition in Western countries has been held back, has been deliberately slowed by those that benefit from the old ways of doing things. And we can...
You heard that from someone other than me. What he's talking about is the fossil fuel lobby within the right-wing media that controls how you think. Sorry, I just had to get that across. But
you couldn't be more right.
That's exactly what happened. People believe, if they're told, right, every day, if someone was reading the Daily Express every day, other newspapers do exist, if they were reading it every day and they were said, you're only going to save 2 tons of carbon by putting solar on your roof, and the Chinese are putting another coal-fired power station in every 2 weeks. If they remind you of that, you're going to say, well, what's the point of me doing it?
Absolutely.
And it's that constant browbeating. What's the point of you doing it because they're doing that?
Absolutely. But the thing is, like, it sounds conspiratorial and all this, but we would absolutely expect it. So,
you say it sounds conspiratorial.
I mean, it is.
It almost is. But look, we're at 2 different ends of the spectrum. Yeah, you're a radical scientist who is prepared to be arrested, and you have been, I think, twice. Whereas I'm not prepared to be arrested, but I am a radical environmentalist who uses solar, a capitalist business structure. We're coming from 2 different ends of the spectrum about what we do as protesters and as environmentalists within an industry. But we're both fighting for exactly the same thing. But we've both got those core beliefs as to what's stopping us. We agree with.
I don't think beliefs is the right word. It's understanding of facts and history. So we have the receipts for all of this, and of course you would completely expect it.
That's a good expression. We have the receipts.
Well, we do.
Yeah, it's a good expression.
So through the 50s and 60s and 70s, scientists working for Exxon and fossil fuel companies did this amazing research, and they knew better than government scientists what climate change would do. They made predictions for what the temperature would be like in 2020, and they were pretty correct. So at that, and governments knew at this stage, the fossil fuel oil companies were the most powerful companies in the world. The biggest company in the world was Exxon, and we faced this clear crisis. We have a global climate crisis. If we are to deal with this properly, it means shutting down the most valuable, powerful industries there have ever been in history. So what do we think the most powerful industries that have ever been would do in response to this situation?
They're going to fund climate denialism.
They could have transitioned into being energy companies.
Yes.
But they decided to stay being oil companies. Having decided that, they were obviously going to do everything they can to prevent legislation on climate. And they did it in 2 ways. One was direct corporate lobbying and political donations. I call it corruption, basically. But, it's giving politicians money so that they make decisions in their favor. The second way was to persuade the public that this wasn't a problem. And they invested billions in it in the climate denialism industry. And it started off as outright denial. this isn't happening, or it is happening, but it's caused by solar flares or whatever, or it is happening, but it's actually going to be a great thing. It's really good. As denial got impossible to sustain as an argument, it shifted from denial to delay. And nowadays, the arguments are much more sophisticated. They're still arguments against an energy transition, but they're much more sophisticated. Ooh, it'll be too expensive, or it'll hurt the poor.
Let me ask you, do you think then, obviously we know the reasons why, but the way that oil and gas and the markets are, because they were always the number one traded commodity as well until about 5 years ago, where data is now the biggest traded commodity. So the balance is shifting. But with the energy companies, I mean, that's where all of our pensions are. That's where the whole of our monetary background, all of the foundations within the global economies are all based upon what we dig out of the ground. So whilst we've been talking about Just Stop Oil as a protest movement, as a group, and we've got to stop burning oil, we have to, I'm of the thinking that if we just stopped oil now, the world would collapse. Now, some people are saying it's like a snake shedding its skin, and we've got to be reborn again. But how long is that crash going to be, and what damages are going to be if we did just cut it now? Whereas we need to speed up the transition, but we also need to protect the structures that support society until the full transition.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just Stop Oil aren't demanding an immediate they're demanding an exploration ends to new oil.
That's right. Yes. No, I'm with you there. I'm using it as an example.
Yeah. And that is, that's not an outrageous demand. So the International Energy Agency, which is a conservative global advisory body, say that if we're going to get a handle on climate change, there needs to be no.
The same way our current policies in this country in the last few years are going to miss the 2030 targets, miss the 2050 targets by quite a large amount. I'm aware.
Yeah. So I think, I think we need to do is reduce profligate use of fossil fuels, and so reduce. We need to transition to other sources, but reduce overall demand as well. And there's lots and lots of ways we can do that. So, retrofitting home heating and
well, then the decarbonisation of heating is where the wind's got to be, isn't it? The problem is you're going to generate the least amount of solar energy in the middle of winter when you need the energy most, and the wind doesn't always blow, does it? So we are going to need all different elements. One thing that really gets me is, we've been out looking at it just at the bottom of the garden, is tidal. Why we don't use the power of the moon? Because that is the constant clock. The sun is only with us on average 12 hours a day every single day of the year, whereas the moon is with us 24 hours a day. We only have a neap tide 2 days every 28. Yeah. It's constantly moving otherwise, isn't it?
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. It's a great source of energy. I think one of the problems is that when there have been proposed tidal energy developments in the UK, there have been massive infrastructure projects that will have huge ecological
same
impacts.
As the one across the Wash. Have you seen it?
It was previously it was the Severn. Yep. So I think microtidal is the way to go, or floating tidal, but not giant barrages.
Absolutely brilliant. Up at, do you know CITB? Up at Bircham Newton. Bircham Newton is the National Construction College, CITB it's called, up at Burnham Market area. Yeah. They've got a massive site behind called Constructionarium. It's about 40 acres, and it's where they teach civil engineering undergraduates from universities. It's all funded by civil engineering and the universities, where they teach them how to be civil engineers. Well, I went up there to build an outdoor classroom, so they've got a solar classroom up there. And when I was up there, I was on the roof of a building. They actually show people how to build reservoirs for farmers who abstract water for their crops. Well, one of the big things is water evaporates, and it costs them money. So what we're trying to do is, or what we're doing is, we're teaching them how to build reservoirs that are floating solar or floating wind ready. So we've already got the anchor points and the tethering points and things like that. But one of the ideas, if you looked at a Google image of where we are here, to the side of the solar shed, we've got the relief. Sorry, we've got the tidal river coming in from the Wash, and then we've got the relief channel, which is the overflow from the fens, and all the drainage from the fens comes out that way. So on there, I've got an idea in my head. We've got 11 miles of water, about 150 yards wide, which is dead water. it just takes range away. We could power half of East Anglia by putting a bloody great big solar farm, and we're not touching valuable arable land. Straight a floating solar, 11 miles long, 100 meters wide, all the way down. And here on the river, because of the wash tidal barrage scheme, I come up with some ideas myself. And there's a series of small pontoons in the river with wheels on the back, and they can all be tethered with each other. Where most of the bridges are on the river, that's where gas or electricity cables come across from substations across. So we could plug in quite easily into each of the villages, and all the way from Kings Lynn, all the way down to Downham and beyond to Denver on that tidal water, which is moving 8 knots for 4 hours. 8.5 knots for about 4.5 hours. Then on the way out, it's about 3 to 4 knots coming out. So it's a lot slower. But technology exists. We could quite easily have a series of turbines without impeding the navigation channel or the biodiversity for where the fish live and all the rest of it. There's no plant life in there. It's a tidal brackish water, but there's lots of fish. And we have seals. We can do things without impacting them, using the natural resources that we've got. And because over water, it's always windier, just small turbines as well on each of those. The solutions are there. It's a matter of implementing them. It's a matter of funding them. I mean, a lot of these big projects come from private industry, and it's for development of them that they're only going to be getting 10 pence a kilowatt hour or 20 pence a kilowatt hour for feeding energy into a grid. Economically, it doesn't make sense for them. Whereas it does on someone's house, because the technology's already been proved, it's been developed. We know the price and we know the results, so we can work that out. But when it comes to putting new infrastructure in the first instance, and this is where they're talking at the moment about the delay to the big solar farms is because of the upgrade to the national grid. Well, to me, that's the wrong way of thinking. The national grid was built as a one-way distribution. Solar is a two-way distribution. So what we should be looking at is focusing on microgrids. And each transformer in each village should say, right, here's the capacity that you're allowed to have, and it's got to be rooftop. So you can change policy that way, and everybody locally feeding into the grid rather than spending billions and millions of pounds on all these new pylons and just putting nothing but big solar farms in. Yes, they're the quickest route to success. I'm not a fan of big solar farms myself. Fields are for food in my mind. But I've also come to the point where I accept that we now need these, and we need these quicker than ever before because of the climate crisis. So it's a double-edged sword. If we hadn't dallied for the last 14 years, we wouldn't be in this position. But we have, and we are, so we have to live with it.
That's a really, really important point. It's, there once was a time when we wouldn't have needed radical change, but we left it too long. And the reason why it's now an emergency and we need radical change is because we've spent all this time listening to people saying, hang on, we don't need to do anything. So we really need to stop listening to those people and stop having those people.
Okay, so what are the challenges? So people at home, I mean, a lot of the people watching this, they're going to be people in our networks anyway. So you can have the environmental campaigners and those, Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace, all that sort of people. We're also going to have a lot of people from the technology sector within renewables. So I don't want to be speaking just to our own bubble, because we're going to know most of the answers. But hopefully there's tens of thousands of you out there, millions of you out there that haven't come across us before, and you think, this isn't like, what can I do to do something? So what's your top 5 things for a household? What can they do?
Right. Change of diet.
Yeah, definitely.
Plant-based food is hugely reduces not just your carbon emissions compared to a meat-heavy diet, but also it reduces your impacts on nature, and that's really, really
amount
important.
Of waste as well.
70% of deforestation is caused by the beef industry. 70% of all deforestation in the world.
Whereas 100% of deforestation of Great Britain, the island of Great Britain, was caused 2,000 years ago by the Romans. We were a forest. Great Britain was a forest.
I think the
Ice Age.
I think there's some more recent research that shows that
But
it was more complex than that.
But they built forts and cities.
They did, yeah.
And it was all made of wood. Didn't have bricks in those days.
A lot of our deforestation is very old.
Food, but not. I mean, a lot of people aren't going to go the whole hog with plant-based. I mean, personally, for health reasons, I've gone to zero processed food. But what we've found by having zero processed food and spending more time looking at ingredients, anything with an E goes in the bin. Anything that's got natural goes in us. And what we found is that our waste has gone down because we're not buying all of that packaged crap, and we're driving maybe twice a week down to Landymores down the road, the local garden centre, greengrocers and all the rest of it, just down the road. And he grows all of his own stuff, and we're driving down and picking it up fresh, rather than leaving stuff in the fridge to go off, and then you've got the plastic covering that goes with it. So so the impact on the food diets are really, really important.
So your question, your top 5 things, was that you say what we can do in our household. So this is about reducing household emissions.
Yeah,
is it? Right.
Not just impact, not just emissions, because obviously the natural solution for me is get yourself an air source heat pump, get yourself solar, come to me for it. But no, there's other things as well, isn't there?
So I'd like to move beyond our own lifestyle things, actually, because I mean the main 3 of them are like, you know, your household energy, transport and flying, and diet. So we've talked about them anyway. I think the most powerful thing that everyone can do at any time is just talk about it. And this is...
Become the catalyst.
Yeah, exactly. Just start conversations, stop it, break this spiral of science. The third thing, I think, is, we always talk about individual change and, government changing the rules of the game and government stimulating things. But so we talk about top down and bottom up. But that misses out everything in the middle, which is all our communities, all our businesses. It's you operate in that middle ground in between. And every organization, every sports club, every library, every school, every business, every community has to not just embark on an energy transition and reduce its impacts, but also has to adapt to the new world that's coming.
I think that's the biggest thing. I think we both the protest movement, the campaigners, and the industry. I think most of us have accepted that we've reached so many of the tipping points because of delay in action.
Things are going to get bad,
Yeah, I think we've got to talk about climate adaptation. And whilst it is bad news, we can't be doom mongers about it. We've got to accept that it's happening. Bloody hell, look what we've done as human beings. We've buggered it all up. Now let's put it right. And collectively we can, but it's little things like you said earlier about some people will gloss it up as the benefits of climate change. Well, if it means more people spending more holidays in Britain under 35 degrees worth of heat rather than flying to Spain, I am going to agree with that, Charlie. If it stops them flying and it supports British economy, then that's a good thing. What I would like to see is people like in my cohorts, people in the industry, giving up a day a month, people like yourselves, instead of gluing yourselves to roads and spraying paint over works of art, I'd like to see you become STEM ambassadors, science, technology, and you're already a scientist. You're natural teachers. You're educating people through the media, through social media. You're doing it in street protests. Why don't you stand in front of a class of 39-year-olds or in front of university students and be the catalyst, be the inspiration that triggers them into doing something? You might trigger an inspiration in someone that becomes an ex-climate scientist that's going to come up with a solution just by being a STEM ambassador and giving up your time instead of closing a road for 2 days, doing 4 hours in front of a load of students.
So I agree that is a fantastically important thing to do. I don't agree that it has to be done instead of protesting. I think we need everything, everywhere, all at once. And my answer to always, I think, when people say don't do this, do that, is we need both. And so, at the moment, we have, just to simplify the numbers, we have 1% of people that are doing climate activism. We have 1% of people that are implementing the transition through their businesses, like you. And then, we have another couple of percent of people doing other change in other ways. I agree that other stuff needs doing, but why don't ask the 1% doing activism to stop what they're doing and do that. Get the 96% that aren't doing anything and get them
Sadly,
to do that.
The 96% are reading the newspapers that are influenced against you because of things we talked about earlier. And that's the thing, because nobody disagrees with the message of just stop oil. Nobody I know disagrees with the message. But it does cause barriers up when I'm in front of a customer who's a Daily Mail reader.
it's interesting actually.
It's for psychology. It's what they're being told. It generally gets their backs up.
So there's been some really interesting research that suggests that that's not the case. So we often think that's the case, and it's interesting to hear you've encountered that personally. But they did some research.
Well, it's just perception. So I'm not factual based. It's just perception from conversation.
Last year, a research body called the Social Change Lab did. They were doing surveys on a sample of 2,000 random people before, during, and after Just Stop Oil were blocking motorways. And what they found was when Just Stop Oil blocked motorways, that increased support for Friends of the Earth.
Right, okay.
So people are like, I don't like, it turns them away from them, but it doesn't turn them away from the broader movement.
Okay, so you're saying those 1% doing that direct action can actually be a catalyst for the 96 to actually support, not necessarily the movement,
not that organisation, but get them thinking about the issues.
No, I can accept that. I haven't seen the research, and I'll accept it. You're a scientist, I've got to accept it.
It's called the radical flank effect.
Yep. No, I get it.
And you can imagine how it works. I'm the radical flank. You're the moderate flank. So,
mind you, not if you read my Twitter feed.
But when you're in the market square,
yes,
you're talking to people about solar. You're the moderate flank. So, people hear Just Stop Oil. Shouting on TV, and people go, I don't like them. But then, months later, they find themselves in a situation with this nice, polite man in a suit, giving the same message with a completely different framing.
Exactly.
And you sound really reasonable. But the thing is, you sound more reasonable than you would have if there hadn't been those people.
I'm with you, because I've already sparked the interest in the conversation. They've got questions to ask me because of what they've seen. So maybe they might be in the catalyst for some of our customers that have decarbonised. Yeah. No, I get it.
I think
all I know is that when I mentioned Just Stop Oil as a headline on one of the blogs that I wrote on my website, my phone stopped.
Oh, okay.
I changed the terminology, took the words Just Stop Oil out in that order and put it into the body of a text, given the reasons why we must stop oil. And so the phone started ringing again.
So there's identity-based issues there.
Definitely.
If you associate yourselves with the people who have made themselves unpopular, that won't help you. If you dissociate yourself from them, but come in from the side.
This is why I would like to see all the main campaign groups: Extinction Rebellion, Scientist Rebellion, Just Stop Oil, Insulate Britain, Critical Mass, all these different environmental movements, even Reclaim the Streets for the cycle movement. I would love to see something where they're promoting the local solutions. Now, naturally, as a local businesses, and my network is businesses all over the country under the Solar Nation. But I'm not just talking about you becoming salespeople for us, but there's every single community has got businesses that have got solutions, be it an insulation company, be it a boiler maintenance company, be it a solar company, be it an electrician who does safety inspections, all of those things. One of the things I'm trying to encourage village halls at the moment is a lot of village halls and community buildings were encouraged to become warmer hubs, where the council was saying, look, instead of putting the heating on at home, it's really expensive, go to the local library and we'll heat you and give you a cup of tea. So I'm doing something completely opposite, because solar doesn't work very well in the middle of winter. I'm encouraging village halls to have cooling hubs, because there's climate. If we're going to hit 40 degrees more often, we're going to have a lot of old people dying in their rooms, in their little villages. And instead of having 30 or 40 old people sitting there with their fans on, all using loads and loads of electricity with air conditioning units, why don't they all go to the village hall that's got solar panels on the roof, it's got surplus energy during the day, so use it to cool everyone down. So it's little practical measures like that. It's about encouraging people to live slightly differently with what they've got, but just doing something slightly differently.
I completely agree. And lots of people in the climate movement are doing that. There's an organisation called the Climate Majority Project that listeners might want to look up, which is all about community-based approaches, and lots of people are trying to work on these grassroots approaches, and I couldn't agree more. It's really, really important, and particularly important as we move forward, because our communities have to become more resilient.
That's the issue, that resilience.
Resilience is such an issue. So we need more community-based work. But, you talked about, small businesses in communities and stuff, and how there's so much to be done there. And you're right, but those businesses are fighting against the tide. You've had to spend the last 20 years fighting against the tide to establish yourself as a solar business, because you were doing that within a national environment that wasn't giving you a helping hand.
No, it's been saying that Ed Miliband done quite well back in 2010. He introduced the first feed-in tariff scheme,
but it was scrapped by the Tories.
They actually kept it going longer than what it was due to. But I personally think it should have been cut earlier when prices come right down, because even today people are going to get a 10 or 12% return on their investment. They can't do that elsewhere. You can't do that with a traditional investment. So, it does stack up.
It's a good enough deal already to get solar. It doesn't need an inducement.
Now it is. Now it is. We needed a feed. We needed something, and we had it, and it was messy the way it was scrapped. The short notice, it upset businesses. There was redundancies, and it was wrong the way that it should have been more staged, more certainty in the reductions of the feed-in of the clean energy cashback scheme, and they should have introduced a proper feed-in tariff earlier. But that's down to the energy companies to start playing ball with export meters, so people could be paid for what they send back to the grid. And I still don't think that's right. I think personally, people should be paid for what goes back to the grid at the same rate as what they buy it for. If you're an energy company, they can be your customer. But they do all this trading. So, for me personally, I use 7,000 kilowatt hours a year. It should cost me about £2,000 because of the technology I've got in. The only energy I buy is of a night time at a cheap rate, and I store it in my battery or into my car. So everything we do is at 8.5 pence a kilowatt hour. But I've had to spend 20 grand to get all of that technology in. Yeah. But so we're talking about fossil fuel industry earlier, how much they support these other things. Two of the biggest in Britain, funders of the fossil lobby, Barclays, and also BlackRock, who invest in everything. They're now ploughing money into us as an industry, and we're sitting on millions and millions of pounds to distribute to the public under leases and not so much loans, but leases. So people can actually have solar and battery technology and air source heat pumps free of charge, no upfront cost, and then pay a lease on it. It could be up over 25 years. So you really reduce the cost. So the people who are unable to pay up front, we've now got solutions for them as well. Yes. But it's a case of getting that out there without, we want to use what we've got as a reason to combat climate change, but I'm just a salesman. That's where we need the support. The industries need the support of the activists, as well as I think if some of the techniques or tactics weren't quite so ardent, you might get more support from the businesses, and we could meet together somewhere.
So lots to talk about there. With regards to tactics, we do lots and lots of stuff that isn't so ardent and that would be really popular. But guess what? You don't hear about it.
Doesn't get in the news.
Because it's called the activist's dilemma. Like the only, to get heard, you have to be disruptive. But that's not the way to be popular. So, the way I think about it is, activists employing disruptive tactics are the fire alarm. And nobody likes the fire alarm, but the fire alarm's job is not to be popular. The fire alarm's job is to say, wake up everybody, we have a situation.
Do you think there's anybody in the country that doesn't know what's happening?
Yeah, I do, yeah. There are very few people that don't know it's happening at all. I don't think there are very many people that understand the severity of it.
We're in that different bracket because we follow it. It's in our bubble. We read daily reports.
We're in a situation where, civilization could collapse within the lifetimes of my nieces and nephews that are already alive.
Well, look at climate migration. So civilizations, when I say civilizations, communities have already been disseminated by deforestation, by drought, by flooding. You look at what's happening in Central Africa, some parts of Africa at the moment, the floods that have never flooded before, places that have never flooded
all
before.
over the world's flooding at the moment. And so this has been a real problem for climate communicators for a long time, and the scientific community. I think the scientific community has been surprised by how quickly it's all happened, but we've always been talking about it as a future problem. To this day, we still get people saying we have to do it for our grandchildren.
No, it's about now. No, I'm with you on that. Yeah,
like so, 15 miles maybe up the river up there is Heacham.
Yep.
So there. Heacham has it's a coastal town. It's protected by a shingle ridge.
Yep.
Every year, the council and the Environment Agency, who are jointly responsible for that, they send the bulldozers up because the winter storm is getting bigger and bigger, so they have to spend more and more money sending the bulldozers to shore up the shingle ridge. It used to cost like 80 grand or something. It's gone up to £1 million a year, and they can't afford it. So I'm not sure what's happened. I think it's been delayed, but 2024, there's a report coming out. They've always had a policy, a hold the line policy. Yep. We're going to hold the line. We will not let the sea in. This year, they're going to decide whether to continue the hold the line policy or not. So this is, communities, and that's in West Norfolk. In East Norfolk, we've got Haysborough, we've got Hemsby, the fastest eroding shorelines in Europe. Houses falling into the sea. This is not a future problem. We have climate refugees in this country already, and we will have some coming up increasingly in the future. So
no, I get where you're coming from. There's a big thought about natural allowing the seas to reclaim the land as well. So
managed realignment.
Yeah. So where that has happened, it's been very successful. The salt marshes around the coast and things like that. Sadly, where it needs to happen, that's where we've got people living.
Yeah.
So it's that double-edged thing. Do we look after those people and spend everybody's money on that, or do what we should be doing with the natural land? We should just move away from it and let the sea do what it does naturally in and out, and we should move to higher land. But we're humans. We like to be near the sea.
Yeah. But what you highlight there, I think, is that we need radical changes. Whatever happens, we need radical change. Not just and radical change in two directions. We don't just have to change how we power our society and how we grow our food and everything else. We also, which is climate mitigation, reducing how bad the problem gets. We also need to do climate adaptation. We need to make our societies more resilient to the impacts that are definitely going to happen now, because they're already happening and we can't avoid them.
We want to start winding this up now, but just to leave you on a little bit of good news. When I first started in solar in March 2008, we worked out that a 4 kilowatt solar system, that was about 2010, I do apologise, would take about just over 2 tons of carbon out of the atmosphere. That's what you're offsetting by generating your own. Because of the carbon intensity of the grid has been reduced in the last 10, 12 years, we are now estimating that a 4 kilowatt solar system will only take 1.5 tons of carbon out of the grid. So people say, it's got less. Well, that's because the grid is decarbon. It is getting there. It is slower than what we all wanted. I'm a big fan of microgrids, and that's where I think we should be going. Over in Denmark, I found this out 14 years ago. Over in Denmark, there's new developments, or older developments now, where let's say I've been to your house, we live in the same estate, same village or whatever. I'm going to your, and I've been at yours for the evening. I'm now going home. It's going to take me 10 minutes to walk there. I say into my app, my community app, where I am and where I'm going, what time I'm leaving. The street lights will come on just on my route home and go off as I leave. That's energy conservation. That's smart thinking. That's smart cities. That's future living. And that's where I think we need to go, is we need to use the technology that we've got to make our lives better, make it simpler, and at the same time, save us all a shed load of money.
And I have so much faith that we can do that. I really do. And I think innovators and entrepreneurs like you are absolutely a key to spreading to implementing the changes that engineers and scientists have developed. However, I really think you've talked several times about needing to accelerate the transition. I think the transition's inevitable now because we have better technologies. That is better than oil, and nobody can hold that back.
It's the quickest and cheapest energy source to deploy.
We need to accelerate it, and for me, the key is governments. Governments need to change the rules of the game to support you guys as much as possible, and for that to happen, they need to not be listening to.
Listen, the last budget was the housing lobby have pulled back.
Well, that's it. So we talk about fossil fuel companies, but it's construction industry, aviation industry, motoring industry, agribusiness industry.
Michael O'Leary would love you, wouldn't he? For Ryanair.
Agrochemicals industry, plastics industry, road building industry. All of these industries rely on growing as much as possible. And that means there not being laws in place that would protect the environment and protect us
because it'd be seen as anti-competitive
from them. So they are all, we're in a situation where basically our governments govern for the benefit of industries rather than for the benefit of us.
I think we all know that government can, when it needs to, they can be very, very forceful. We saw it.
We saw it 5 years ago. Yeah,
exactly. We saw it then. I think they missed an opportunity at the time while we were locked down. Cities could have been reimagined.
Yep.
Policies could have been, but they were firefighting. We basically had the wrong caliber of politician in place at the time.
There is no right caliber these days. That's what
I've got a lot of faith. We're going to steer karma with Keir Starmer.
Can I? On that note, so my favourite solution to the problem of inadequate politicians, wrong caliber of politicians, is citizens' assemblies, is bringing decision-making power back to people, taking it away from...
Making it consensual in community.
Get communities of people together in a room, listening to experts, no copies of the Daily Mail or the Express in that room, and they make proper decisions. Power back to the people all the way.
I like that. On that note, Charlie, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed.
It's been such a pleasure.
Absolutely brilliant.
Cheers.
Lovely. Now let's just hope it was recording all the way through.
It better have that.
It was.
Phew.